When two seemingly unconnected people in Seattle, Washington die shortly after consuming cyanide-laced headache medication, police feared they were dealing with a deranged serial killer. The manufacturer of a popular painkiller would order a nationwide recall, and the nation's media would be sent into a frenzy. This is the story of two murders in Seattle that would show just how callous and cold one human could be in the pursuit of money. On a June morning in 1986 in a quiet suburb in Seattle, Washington, 40-year-old mother of two Sue Snow would be discovered on the bathroom floor by her 15-year-old daughter. Sue was huddled up, unconscious and barely clinging to life. Paramedics would transport Sue to Harborview Medical Center, where she would sadly die later that day. An autopsy carried out on the body would uncover telltale signs of the presence of cyanide in Sue's body. Cyanide is a rapid-acting and potentially deadly chemical that can exist in various forms. In manufacturing, cyanide is used to make paper, textiles and plastics. It's also commonly used to exterminate vermin and other household pests. When cyanide is ingested in sufficient quantities, it leads to lung injury, convulsions, loss of consciousness, and respiratory failure leading to death. Tissue samples taken from Sue's autopsy were sent off to an FBI laboratory for testing. When the tests came back, they showed conclusively that the cause of Sue's death had been from acute cyanide poisoning. The question was, who would want to kill Sue Snow and why? She was described as a warm, bubbly, and highly successful mother of two. She was a branch manager at a local Seattle bank, and she had built great relationships with her clients. She had an infectious personality that had kept many choosing to stay with the bank. Twice divorced, she had recently married her husband and long-haul truck driver Paul Webking. A member of Sue's family had described how the couple had had some trouble early on, but Paul asked Sue to marry him and the couple had seemed happy since. On the day of the funeral, Sue's twin sister Sarah found a bottle of Excedrin capsules when looking in Sue's medicine cabinet for headache relief. Sarah almost took one herself, but something caught her attention. She remembered her sister never took them in capsules, so instead of taking one herself, suspicions raised, she handed the bottle over to investigators. Excedrin was a popular over-the-counter pain medication that contained a combination of aspirin, paracetamol and caffeine. Often taken to relieve tension headaches and migraines, Sue and Paul were known to take them most mornings. The bottle of Excedrin found at Sue's home was sent to an FBI laboratory in Washington. Tests carried out revealed that 3 of the remaining capsules were laced with lethal levels of potassium cyanide. Investigators now knew the source of the cyanide that had killed Sue Snow. The discovery of cyanide inside a popular over-the-counter pain medication sent shockwaves across the nation and generated significant media attention. Investigators would initially turn their attention to Sue's husband, Paul Webking. He admitted that it was his idea to change to capsules, but that he had not tampered with the medication leading to Sue's death. Bristol Myers, the company that produced Excedrin capsules, were taking no chances. They ordered all Excedrin medication to be taken off the shelves in the Seattle area. This recall would eventually be expanded to the entire nation. When more tainted bottles showed up on supermarket shelves, a group of drug companies come together to offer a cash reward for information that led to the arrest of the person responsible. Someone did indeed come forward, 43-year-old Stella Nichol. She told police that her husband, Bruce Nichol, had died just weeks earlier. His death had been ruled natural causes by the pathologist. However, Stella told police that Bruce had also taken Excedrin capsules the day of his death, and asked police for samples of his autopsy to be re-examined. In addition, Stella handed over 2 bottles of Excedrin capsules that she said had belonged to her husband. Blood samples taken from Bruce Nichol's autopsy and the 2 bottles of Excedrin capsules taken from his home were both analysed for traces of cyanide. The results would make headlines across the nation. They showed that Bruce Nichol, like Sue Snow, had died due to consuming Excedrin capsules tainted with the deadly substance, and cyanide-laced capsules were found in both bottles taken from his home. Both Stella Nichol and Paul Webking filed wrongful death lawsuits against Bristol Myers, the manufacturer of Excedrin. The FDA sent inspectors to the North Carolina plant where the medication was packaged. However, no traces of cyanide could be found to explain its presence in the bottles in Seattle, so detectives ruled the manufacturer out of the investigation. With contamination at the source now ruled out, the FBI focused their investigation on the end users themselves. Detectives would ask the partners of both victims if they would agree to take a polygraph test. Paul Webking, who is considered a key person of interest by detectives, agreed to take a test. To the surprise of some investigators, he would pass with flying colours and he was subsequently ruled out of further investigation. However, Stella Nichol, the wife of Bruce Nichol, refused to take the polygraph test. She claimed she was too shaken up from her husband's death to be subjected to the examination. Along with refusing to take the test, investigators would find it rather suspicious that with just 5 bottles of tainted Excedrin discovered, Stella Nichol had ended up in possession of 2 of them, both purchased at different times and from separate locations. Meanwhile, an FBI crime lab performed a further examination on the contaminated capsules. They found that, in addition to the cyanide powder, the capsules contained specks of a strange green substance. Tests revealed that the green substance was made up of 4 main chemicals: diclone, monuron, simazine, and atrazine. This enabled investigators to narrow the origin of the green substance down to one common commercial product that contained all 4 chemicals. That product was an algicide used in home aquariums sold under the brand name Algae Destroyer. When detectives were made aware of this discovery, one remembered that when he had visited the home of Stella Nichol to collect the 2 bottles of Excedrin capsules, he had noticed that she had an aquarium in her living room. He decided to visit around 50 pet stores in the vicinity of her home. Armed with a picture montage of Stella, he wanted to know if any store clerks could remember having ever served her. Detectives were about to get their first significant break. One clerk remembered serving Stella. He said that he remembered selling her a box of Algae Destroyer. He also said that he had advised her she should crush the tablets before adding them to the water. This was a significant piece of circumstantial evidence, and investigators were now sure that they had their suspect. Investigators would uncover that Stella had received $76,000 in life insurance payout after Bruce's death, and would have received a further $100,000 if his death had been ruled an accident. Investigators also uncovered that the Nichols had been in serious financial trouble. Detectives learned that just 5 days before Bruce's death, Stella had wrote to one of her creditors blaming marital issues as the reason for repayments having not been met. She said that her husband was now out of the way and she would now be able to make payment. An FBI handwriting specialist was asked to compare Bruce's signature on the life insurance documents to that of his known handwriting samples. The handwriting specialist concluded that they were not a match, and in fact, they were more consistent with the handwriting with that of Stella Nichol. Investigators were now sure that Stella Nichol was responsible for the murders of her husband Bruce Nichol and bank manager Sue Snow. Detectives believed money was the motive. With threats of repossession of her home and crippling debts from other lenders, Stella took out a fraudulent life insurance policy on her husband. Detectives believe she then crushed up cyanide in the same bowl as she had previously used to crush the Algae Destroyer used in her home aquarium. She then laced her husband's Excedrin capsules with a deadly cyanide and proceeded to taint 3 more bottles to place back on supermarket shelves in an elaborate plot to frame her husband's death as an accident in order to receive an additional $100,000 payout. Although there were no doubts in detectives' minds that Stella was a callous, cold-hearted sociopath with little respect for human life, they didn't believe they yet possessed enough compelling evidence to successfully convict her. They would approach Stella's 18-year-old daughter and confront her with the circumstantial evidence they had against her mother. And to the surprise of detectives, she told them that her mother had told her she had killed Bruce Nichol. Furthermore, she said her mother had previously tried poisoning him, and when that failed, she took books out from the library to find another method, and that's when she came across the idea of using cyanide. The FBI subpoenaed library records which showed Stella had indeed taken out a number of books on poison. one called Deadly Harvest, which was still showing as being overdue and not yet returned to the library. Detectives finally felt they could build a strong case against Stella Nichol for the murder of her husband Bruce Nichol and banker Sue Snow. On December 9th, 1987, Stella was arrested and indicted on 5 charges of product tampering, 2 of which led to death. She would go on trial in April of 1988, and after a 4-week trial and testimony from her own daughter, she was found guilty of all charges and sentenced to 90 years imprisonment. The judge forced Nichol to forfeit her remaining assets to the families of her victims. In 2018, she became eligible for parole, but as of yet, she remains in prison. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing to my channel.